You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss and joining me as always, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic now that the weather's back to normal here and no longer icy and snowy. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, great to hear, and we've had a bit of sun today as well, so happy days all round. Last week's episode went out a bit later than usual. This week's episode we're bringing it out a bit earlier than usual, a day earlier. We didn't think we'd have much to talk about. We thought we'll have a little look ahead to the start of the Pro Tour season, and that will probably be it. But there's a lot to get through, as you'll hear on the show this week, and we've got 3 great guests coming up as well. They're all going to be in action on the Pro Tour this week as well, and that's where we're going to start. The new PDC ProTour season gets underway on Thursday with the first Super Series, a few withdrawals, but our first look at the class of 2021. Is it the strongest field yet?
I think we ask this question pretty much every year, but I'm going to surprise us and say no this time around. It's not meant as an insult to the new tour card holders, because there's some very quality players in there, top to bottom. Even you look at the last qualifier in the UK Q School Order of Merit, Danny Baggish. We had him on a couple times now. He came within a couple darts of making it to the last 16 of the World Championships, and who knows, he might not even have to go to Q School if he won another match beyond that. And you look at the bottom of the European Q School Order of Merit, Robert Marjanovic. I play with Robert Marjanovic's darts, so I'm not going to say a bad word about him. So literally top to bottom, it is a very good class. But also because of the pandemic, we saw a lot of players decide not to go to Q School. And certainly even more that we'd have never heard of who could have made a big impact that decided not to go. And even amongst the players who have gone, many of them haven't played competitive darts for a year. So we don't really know the standard they are at. We got a glimpse of it, but they don't have that match sharpness that they would normally have going into the Pro Tour season, and the match sharpness that they would need, especially having to play week in, week out against the best players in the world. I think it'll come about, and we have some great players here. We only have a 5-time world champion in Raymond van Barneveld leading the way, other world champion in Scott Mitchell, world finalist in Kirk Shepard, among the new tour card holders. And then you go back, obviously, the returning players are quality. Those who are in the top 64 have to be in the top 64. And last year was one of the best Q School classes ever, partially because of all the problems with the BDO. And all those players obviously are back this year as well. But I think overall, the field the last couple years of the 128 tour card holders was just a little bit deeper than it is right now. And there's a lot of young players and a lot of inexperienced older players who are now making their debut here. The quality will come and they will improve. But I'm going to say overall, I think, at least on paper, it's just a little bit weaker because of the pandemic than last year or the year before. But I'm ready to be proven wrong. And last time I said that, 2 months later, Mervyn King proved me wrong by making the final of the Masters. So challenge to all the returning and the 29, or I should say 33 new tour card holders, because of course there's also 2 from the Challenge Tour and 2 from the Development Tour. Prove me wrong. Because I want to be proven wrong.
I think that's a fair point that you make, but I do think that you are going to be proven wrong this year, because I looked down that list, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have seen our list that we put up with all the 128 tour card holders for this year, and the players that we've had on the show, the players that we haven't had on the show, and there's other lists doing the round as well on who's going to be playing on the tour this year. But you look up and down that list, there's a lot of quality there, and last year was such we had the 4 months break, so we can't really base it on 12 months, best part of 12 months of action. But the darts that we did see, there was a lot of quality there. And I was just looking at Dart Connect earlier, looking year by year. It's not been around too long, but just basing it on the last 3 years, you had 2018 overall average 90.9, 2019 91.5, and then last year 91.9. So it's steadily increasing every year. Now, whether that's going to go down this year, we're going to have a little bit of a dip, I'm not so sure. Looking at the other stats as well, 2019 you had players that averaged 90 plus throughout the Players' Championship events. You had 83 last year, 87, and then 95 plus. You had 15 players do that in 2019. This last year you had 18. So just looking at those sort of things, it does tell you that there are players that are capable of playing to that level consistently throughout the year, playing to a higher level. Now, whether they're able to do that this year, we don't know yet. We haven't seen a dart thrown yet, but I think if I'm basing it on what we saw in 2020, the list of players that you write down and you think they're capable of doing some damage in this tournament, they're capable of going all the way and doing something, they're capable of beating a top player. The list gets bigger every year, and we'll come on to that in our next question as well, about players that we could see win a title for the first time in the PDC, a senior title. That list is going up every year as well. So for me, I think this is going to end up being the strongest field, but as you say, maybe a little bit cautious at the moment because we've not seen how these events have gone yet. So we'll leave it for now, but I think making a prediction, this will end up being the strongest field we've seen.
Now, as you said, we're going to get on to that other question about first-time winners. Last year, we had 4 first-time winners in the PDC: Ryan Searle, Ryan Joyce, Devin Peterson, and, of course, Dimitri Vandenberg, who lifted his first trophy at the World Match Play. Also a first Pro Tour title last year for Damon Hedda to go along with his win the year before in the World Series events. Is there anyone you tip to be a first-time winner or the next first-time winner this year?
I've got a few names down here, and I'd probably wrote down a lot more, but I thought I want to save a few for you because I could have easily rattled off maybe 9 or 10 names, maybe even double that from what we saw last year, the potential of some of these players to go on deep runs. But I'll stick to a few names. That the first, of course, is the player that is the highest ranked on the order of merit right now that hasn't won a title, and we had him on the show just before the Masters, Chris Dobey. He was making his debut in that event, the world number 24, got the call up because of that extended field, and we said, could that be the weekend that he breaks his duck, gets that first PDC senior title? It wasn't to be. This year is going to be a big year for him, especially when we get towards the end of the year. He's defending semi-finals in the World Grand Prix, Players' Championship finals, a last 16 at Ali Pali. There's a lot of money for him to defend at the back end of the year. So if he's able to maybe pick up the odd Pro Tour title, maybe win a European Tour title when they come back, then that's going to help him out a little bit towards the end of the year, that he'll have got a bit more money than he usually does. So I'll put him up near the top of my list. Another player you got to mention, Dirk van Dijvenbode. He's now into that top 32, and he's a player that, just mentioned Chris Dobey defending money this year. He's not defending any money. This year is still going to be adding on to his ranking, so we're expecting him to pick up where he left off last year, got to a TV final, World Championship quarter-finalist. He's someone that you fancy to go all the way maybe in one of these events and get a title. And I've got to mention as well, Gabriel Clemens. He's someone that it surprises me that he's not won a PDC senior title yet, especially when you go back to the Winter Series. I was looking at his stats from last year, and he averaged 107 for a day, and his averages for that day was something like 112, 105, 108, 112, and then dipped down. He was pretty poor in his next game, only a 96, lost in the quarterfinal. But when you're doing that in consecutive games, if you can just do that for another 3 games, then you fancy yourself to get that title. So I think Gabriel Clemens is going to be on my list as well. So my 3 will be Gabriel Clemens, Dirk van Dijvenbode, and Chris Dobey.
Not a bad place to start. I was considering all of them as well. I was going to start with Dirk van Dijvenbode because after what we saw last year, it is surprising that he didn't win a title last year because he was really fantastic. Had a little bit of a dip right when we came back from the 4-month break, but that was it. He was one of the top 5 players in the PDC darts for the first couple months of the year. And then he was playing as a top 10, top 15 player at the back end of the year. That's why he made a TV final. Okay, it was long odds to do so, but you really can't say it was surprising based on what we saw from him. And then kicked on at the World Championships as well. He looks the real deal now, and there's no reason to think he'll regress. If anything, he's going to get even better this year. Lifting a first title seems to be something that will happen sooner rather than later, kind of like we were saying with Devin Peterson before he lifted a title back in October or September on the European Tour. It's at that point now for Dirk van Dijvenbode that it's the question of when, not if. Beyond that, throw out a few other names. Go a little bit further down the order of merit. I fancy John Henderson to have a bounce back year. He really struggled last year, really struggled the back end of 2019 as well. But he put a focus during lockdown on getting fit, getting into shape. And that does take time, not just to get fit and get into shape, but also to adjust, especially when you're a player like John Henderson, whose throw is all about his movement, all about his swaying on the Aki. I mean, he even plays on that in his walk-on song. So it's going to take time for him to learn how to throw again with his new, more fit frame. But once he does, I think he'll get back to the player he was, which was a really, really good competitor on his day. That's why he's made multiple finals in the PDC, including a European Tour final. I think he'll have a bounce back. I think it might take some time, but I think once he gets it together, he will go back to being the John Henderson of old. And that makes him a force to lift a first title. And I'd like to see it because it is surprising as well that he hasn't won one yet. Of the new tour card holders, got to start with our guest who you'll be hearing from in a minute, Scott Mitchell. He's a world champion. He was the former world #1 in the BDO. And he made a good showing of himself when we did see him on the Pro Tour last year. It was a little bit unfortunate to not get into the Players' Championship finals last year because he was playing at a high standard, but he was running into players playing at a high standard. And he did play most of the Players' Championship events because he had such a good start to the Challenge Tour year. Scott Mitchell, if he gets it going, and based on what we saw at Q School, there's no reason to think he won't, he absolutely could win his first PDC title this year. Beyond that, of the other players to come through Q School, there's a lot of them who could, but I'll try to name one from the European Q School, and I'm going to go with Adam Gavlas. I don't think he's there yet, but I really think he is going to be a star one day. And a question for him is, how long does it take for him to find his feet in the PDC? I think he'll find it fairly quickly. I think he may even surprise us this upcoming week and have a very good first week. If he does find his feet, a title could come this year. And if it doesn't come this year, it will eventually, because he is, as I said, the real deal.
Well, you mentioned him a moment ago. Let's hear from him now. Here's our chat with the former BDO World Champion and the new PDC Tour Card holder, Scott Mitchell. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former BDO World Champion and the new PDC Tour Card holder, Scott Mitchell. Thanks for the time, Scott. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm still riding the crest of a wave, I think.
Good to hear. Well, first off, congratulations on winning your tour card at Q School last week. What has the last week been like since Q School finished, and the realisation that for the next 2 years you're going to be one of those 128 on the tour?
Firstly, I've been sort of overwhelmed by the interest of getting a card. So, the media stuff has been sort of quite mad again, which is absolutely lovely for my sponsors and myself and everything else. And yeah, sort of like, the more people have been talking to me about it, and the message, there were just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages over all the media sort of side of things, and I was a little bit overwhelmed by it again, if I'm honest.
We had you on a couple of times last year. The first time was right after you won an event on the first Challenge Tour weekend, getting ready for your Pro Tour debut. You said it was going to be a busy year, PDC, WDF, maybe some BDO as well. It didn't quite work out that way for obvious reasons, but looking back, just how important was that win on the Challenge Tour to keep you playing in-person darts last year?
It was vital. It was absolutely vital. I did, like I say, we're saying nobody realised how vital that was. Where it didn't leave me in the wilderness, and being the top of the Challenge Tour for so long sort of offered me so many opportunities to get a bite and a taste of the Pro Tour, and I'm hoping that serves me in good stead come this week.
And then the last time we had you on was just before the last Challenge Tour weekend. You went in on top spot, a good start to the weekend, last 16 and a semi-final. The first 3 events you were still top of the order of merit going into the last 3. You ended up dropping off to 5th. Can you put your finger on what went wrong in those last 3 events?
I think I was unlucky for the draws, if I'm honest. I think one of those, after I'd lost to Jim Williams in the semi-final, I was really disappointed because I knew that if I'd have made the final, I probably felt that was enough for a tour card. So there was a little bit of disappointment in that. And then I drew Matty Dennant, who was right there with us. So that's a tough first round draw, and I made a mistake and I missed a double there and let him in, and he sort of like opened up a whole can of whoop ass on me, which was great. And then I played, I can't remember how I played the next game. I was so poor the first game. I was just so rubbish. And then the last game I played really, really well. Got through to about, I think, last 32 or 64 and lost to Brian Hallis, who's a very good Yorkshire County player. So there was no qualms or airs of graces. I know that it really hurt. It really hurt for 4 or 5 days afterwards, that's for sure, to miss out on the card.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, fast forward a few months and you've now got your tour card via a different route, but heading home after that Challenge Tour weekend, did it take long to get over that disappointment?
Yeah, it did. It was a good 5 or 6 days. It was, I wasn't really talking to people. I was grunting at them, and, I felt at that time that I'd probably missed my best chance to get a tour card, but there were still lessons to be learned from what I'd done. Even though I'm 50 years old, I tried to learn from the game every day, and I tried to take something good from the game. If you're negative towards your game and you can only see the bad things and get upset about the doubles you missed, there's no way forward for you. You've got to find, even if it's a 140 while somebody else is on top, to leave yourself a double, that's a good shot under pressure. So you're still doing good things. I think a lot of players forget that, but I took some good stuff out of it, and I think going into the Pro Tour situation that I was in, I'd learned so much from being ahead in the Challenge Tour that I kind of didn't make the same mistakes a second time.
Definitely. Well, let's look back at this year's Q School then. You had a bye through to the final stage. First up, you get Fallon Sherrick. Now, with all the restrictions in place, it was probably better to play a first game this year rather than last year with a room of 600 odd people, but still the odd camera dotted around, circling around the room. I'm guessing there was a lot of focus on that game still.
Yeah, there was a lot of focus on the game, and bearing in mind I hadn't sort of stood up and played against somebody since the start of November in the last Pro Tour, and so they'd had women's qualifiers and all this sort of thing for Ali Pali since and what have you. So I was really nervous anyway because the bookies had put me at 1-2 to get a card, and I sort of noticed that and probably made too much of it. But I felt going in, I felt really, really confident of getting a card. So when you haven't played for 4 months, and then you don't really want to draw Fallon at that point. You're looking for a nice little way to ease your way in. And to be fair, Fallon played absolutely fantastic. Every time I missed something, she hit it. And we're friends anyway. And when we've done sort of like travelling with England together and stuff, so there's no animosity between either of us. I'm so pleased she played well, and probably that's part of the reason it probably bucked my ideas up for the rest of the week. If I'm honest, she did me a favour more than a hindrance.
Excellent. Well, day two, and Jack Main, one of the stars of UK Q School, it turned out to be, throws a 103 average against you in the first round. The third day, you pick up a couple of wins though, some high 90 averages. Did you feel like the game was there to then have a big run on the final day?
I thought the game was there the day before against Jack Main. To be honest, it was. Jack was on 133 average after 3 legs, and I'm sat there still in the game thinking I've not done a lot wrong here. The kid's playing brilliant. He was off the high of making the final the day before, seeing something and seeing the situation for what it was. You do that when you're a little bit older. But in the fourth leg against Jack, I missed a double top to go 3-1, and then I won the next 2 after that in 15 and 14 or something. So I could have been 3-3 with Jack. So again, I took that into the next day. The averages were great the next day. Joe Mernon played better than me and knocked me out in the third day. But you wake up on the fourth day knowing you've not really had a chance to show and shine, if that makes sense. And you're looking for a reasonable draw, and then you draw Alan Norris first game.
Well, you get that chance to shine on the final day. You go all the way and win that event. You win your card during the day, so you don't have to win it outright in the end. But when did you find out that you'd done enough, and what were the emotions like when you got told you're in? You've got to talk out?
Well, I was told before the semi that they think that I'd done enough, and I was like, well, I can't be sure of that. When somebody said they think, somebody else said, no, I'm sure you've done enough. But that was two people had told me, and 2 people had told me slightly different things. So I went in just playing Andy Gelding thinking that I had to beat him, to be sure. So it was really wobbly arm time, and I played Andy a couple of times, and I think that's the worst game we've ever played. But to come out on top of it, that was when the kind of emotion hit. I had to go off, and most people know me that watched me play before and know how I am. I am an emotional person. I am sometimes over emotional, but to know after that game that I had a card was pretty special. I had to take myself away for 5 minutes, but the family were all watching at home, knowing that I had a card. So I'm playing Andy, and they can see that I'm struggling, and they just couldn't tell me. They just couldn't say that yes, you're definitely home safe and dry. So once I won a couple of legs in that game, so that was great. So. That then left me playing Danny Baggish and in the final, and once you've gone that far, and okay, you've got the car, but it's a much nicer statement to win the final and make it outright, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And that tour card, that's got your entry into all the Players' Championship events this year. But looking back to 2020, you ended up playing 22 of the 23. You could have played 23, but I think you had another commitment for the other event. But looking at last year, you played Michael Van Gerwen, Peter Wright, Gerwin Price. You've seen how high the standard is. I think one day you lost to James Wade with a 104 average. What do you think you'll take from last year's experiences to help you this year?
I'm just hoping that I've learned lessons from last year. There were games that I made some massive mistakes during the game. There were games that I mentally got wrong approaching the games with other players, and I think I learned an awful lot with that. You know, there are no easy draws over there. You know, from 1 to 128, there's no easy draw. There's more favourable draws, but there are not what you would say as an easy draw. So you have to prepare yourself for the first game like you're in a final elsewhere. So I've learned how to prepare myself a little bit better for those first games, whereas probably in the BDO there'd be, you know, a couple of hundred on boards, and you'd be lucky to get sort of like half an hour of decent practice before you start. Well, there's none of that problem in the 128s and the Pro Tours, and it's making sure you prepare yourself right and practice for long enough beforehand, because obviously we started earlier in the BDO at 10:30 or 10 o'clock at some places, and if we were abroad, obviously they were an hour ahead, so effectively you start at 9:30 in the morning. So there's lots of changes and lots of things that I learnt last year that are very different from my BDO sort of 10, 12 years, and I've got to take those learnings and trying to remember them rather than forget them from last year.
Well, it's not long to wait either. The first lot of Pro Tour events start this Thursday in Bolton. Then you've got the UK Open the following week, an event which you've played in before in 2007 on TV against Jelle Klaasen. What do you remember about that event?
Well, to be honest, to go back to Bolton after 2007, and that was my first real appearance in the big time. It feels like, you know, we've done 14 years and I've done full circle, and I'm back at the PDC, and where are those other 14 years gone? But you know, I'm really looking forward to it, and obviously the UK Open, playing Jelle at that time, I remember that still like it was yesterday. I remember Jelle having a chance of a 9-darter in one leg, and he missed it, and I went out in 12 because I had to throw on a 1-4-6. Still my favourite finish ever. And I give it the large one, and I think it was Nigel Pearson and a couple of I was one of the commentators on the start on the day, and Nigel and I have become friends since. So I'm just looking forward to going back to the UK Open. It's kind of where it all started, and hopefully I won't get too nostalgic about it, and I can get my head on and try and get my game out there, because that's all you can do. It's over on the PDC side, you've just got to work out how to get your best game out there as often as you can. So because anywhere sort of anything mediocre isn't going to be good enough. So it's working out how to get your best game out there. But I'm really looking forward to the UK Open.
And I know for a lot of years, particularly after you won the world title at Lakeside, people asking you, will you ever go to the PDC? And 2020, circumstances changed, the darting landscape changes, you go to Q School. A year or so later, you are now one of those 128 tour card holders. Does it feel a little bit surreal? Because probably not so long ago, darts fans were probably thinking that you'd be one of those people that would always stick with a BDO.
Yeah, I think there is that. I think the darts fans did think I was a bit of a lifer, and I in 2015 when I won the World Championships, I've got to be honest, I thought that I was going to get an invite over then. You know, Stephen Bunting had the year before, and you know, that year I was actually set up and ready, and the sponsor said, you're going to have to step up now, we're going to come with you, we'll go to the PDC, and we'd all sort of seen it as a foregone conclusion that I was going to get invited. And then there was a bit of a shock when I saw that Barry Hearn had tweeted and said, if Scott Mitchell wants a card, then he's got to come and get one. So that was a decision to stay with the BDO and do the best I could for the trophy. And with the trophy, as Stephen had gone and Christian Kist had gone a couple of years before, so we hadn't had anybody that actually won the trophy and stayed. So that was kind of dictated to me then. And then, like you say, you know, the situation with the BDO had become untenable, and I'd already decided a few months before any of the O2 and before after the World Masters debacle, really, with the draw and everything, it was time to go and have a go. And there would always be a part of my darting life that had I not gone to try and get a card, you know, I'd have walked away from darts one day with feeling that I hadn't probably achieved, or I hadn't completed my dream, or hadn't fulfilled my darting ambition, really. So no matter what happens from here on in, I've probably maxed out with what little ability I do have.
Well, speaking of the BDO, I'm not going to go into current things going on, but looking at the positives for you during that chapter of your career, aside from the world title, all the England caps, can you tell us maybe some of the memories that will stick to you that people might not know? I remember you tweeting me last year when after I got a shirt from Stompe, you said that he gave you loads of cheese one day.
Yeah, I was. There's loads of silly little stories like that. Stompe, we were at the Binder Masters or the Zidadown Masters at the time, and I had these. There's a lovely cheese out there, and I can't remember what the name of it is. It's a Dutch cheese. It's got a few little seeds in it and stuff. I absolutely love it. It's quite a strong cheese. And I was sat at breakfast with Stompe. I had some on my toast, and I said, I love this cheese. And next thing you know, goes out and comes back with like a kilo of this cheese and a cheese slicer. He said, "There you go, mate. Go for your life." And it's just like this is a legend. Stompe buying me a block of cheese. There's other ones. There's Andy Fordham has become a great mate, and I was only speaking to him last night actually, and he took me to the German Open a couple of years ago. When he went, so we drove over. So we went with him, and I went over, and he's outside. He's got knocked out. I'm in the final inside. I think I was playing Dirk Tailnickers, or may have been. I can't remember. Whoever I was playing in the final, anyway. I'm on stage and my phone goes off. So I go to the water table and pretend to change a flight, put my phone on the top of the thing and look at it. And it's Andy. He's texting me from outside. They're doing tractor pulling out here, son. You got to get out here. There's tractor pulling outside the venue. I'm inside playing in the German Open final, and Andy's sending me messages while I'm stood in the final. So there's lots of great stories that I have from my BDO days, and they kind of mould you into the player that you are and the character that you are within the game. So there's some good people out there, and I can't thank them enough.
Good times, and hopefully some more to come. Obviously, yesterday we had some hopeful news on fans coming back and possibly an end to all the restrictions that we're under right now with the virus. We posted a video on Twitter of your invisible dog walk on at Lakeside. Good fun, that. Could we see it come back one day?
I'm not sure that I was ready for the dog walking stuff when it did come, and I'm not sure that it's something that will return at the PDC. I think I need to have my head on a little bit more than that. I loved doing it, and it was great fun, and it used to relax me. And but it's lovely that the fans wanted to come back after your tweet. Yeah, but it's probably I don't even know where the lead is, to be honest. If I'm totally honest, it's probably up in the loft somewhere, stuck in the archive of Scottish memorabilia that I've kept.
Yeah, let the darts do the talking. And we spoke, as I said, after your first Q School last year, and you mentioned your dad sadly no longer with us. He said that he didn't want you to go to the PDC. Now that you are a full part of the PDC and all the hard work that you've put in to get there, do you think he'd say you've done well and you deserve this opportunity? What do you think he'd be thinking right now?
I think he would. I think to be fair, with the BDO situation, I think he would have probably said, advised me to come over. I think the reason he didn't want me to come over is because I was probably pretty comfortable in the top 10, living life as I was, not practicing very much, dedicating myself to the farm, and that's not. I'm not belittling anybody in the BDO or any of the players or anything by saying that. It's just that I had got comfortable. I knew the system, and I didn't worry about things when I was there. So that's probably why he said what he said. I think having seen what's happened, he'd have been the first one to say it's time to go, son. It's time to move on. And I think that was probably in my head when I moved over really and tried to get a card last year. It was probably because he was telling me to do so.
Yeah, and lastly, looking ahead goals-wise for the next 2 years, I guess like all the other new tour card holders, it's to get into that top 64 after year 2. But aside from that, any particular things you're most looking forward to potentially? Any events or venues that you could possibly play at?
Well, I mean, I did another interview the other day, and they said, "Oh, you could go to the Winter Gardens. You could go to this." I mean, I've been to the Winter Gardens for a young farmers' national AGM, and danced till 3 a.m. on that very same floor that the guys play. So it would be lovely it would be a lovely full circle to go back there. That would be a dream to go to the Winter Gardens again in Blackpool, and because that was where my wife and I hadn't been dating long when we went there with the young farmers, so that would be really cool to go back there. And obviously Ali Pali would be great. But the goals for this year really are to try and qualify for the Players' Championship, try and qualify for Ali Pali. It's a difficult thing to do, first year to try and start saying, I want to be in this TV tournament, that TV tournament. You've really got to see how it starts off and go from there and see how the confidence is. But obviously the 2-year goal is to try and keep a card and have another third year and do things like that. I've always been a slow and steady wins the race type player, and the way that my life works is like that. You know, I never got county right for a couple of years. I never got, you know, things sorted with Lakeside for a couple of years. So I'm one of those that takes my time to settle at times. So I'm hoping that the extra year sort of sees me in good stead. But I'm you know, to keep the tour card at the end of the 2 years would be the biggest bonus. And I see no reason why not, the way that I'm playing. You know, my averages are up there with everybody else. And if I can consistently hit those, you can't keep hitting them and then drop off into the 80s for 3 or 4 games. That can't happen. So if I can consistently hit those averages that we're seeing and we've been seeing for the last year, I don't think I'll be a million miles away from what I'm hoping for.
Well, fingers crossed for that, Scott. It's always nice to have a catch up with you, and wish you all the best for the next 2 years, at least on the PDC tour. We're looking forward to seeing how you get on.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for the call and thanks for letting me on again. It's always good to talk to you guys.
Thanks again to Scott for joining us. Now some news to get into since we last spoke, and the PDC announcing on Monday this week that the first 9 nights of the Premier League will be held behind closed doors at the new home of World Darts in Milton Keynes. What are your thoughts on the move?
I have to assume that this was decided on in conjunction with Sky Sports, and assuming Sky says we want to get this underway, we want to get this going in the springtime, then it's the right call, because it's, well, as of the time you're listening, just a couple days ago now, you will have heard from the Prime Minister the current guidelines and the current timeline to reopen the country, and probably a fairly similar timeline we'll see throughout much of Europe. And it seems to be a realistic timeline from what we're seeing. You know, I'll take the U.S., and I'm more familiar with the U.S. numbers, but just now in terms of COVID cases on a 7-day rolling average, we're now finally, for the first time since the middle of October, below the peak that we hit in the summer, which still is an absurdly high daily total, but it shows that things have really started to improve as the vaccines get rolled out. And you have to think that that will continue, and by the summertime, and we'll get to that in the next question, we'll be able to have at least some crowd and possibly a fairly decent crowd for events. But if Sky doesn't want to wait, and if it's not possible with the schedule to make it so that the season doesn't start till June, the only other alternative is to play it behind closed doors and to do it like they're doing in 2 batches, 1 of 5 days, 1 of 4 days, to get through that first stage, to minimize travel, to minimize the commitments the players have to make to get to the events, and to minimize as well, you know, the time in the bubble. Assuming this is what Sky wanted and wanted to make sure we get underway and get through that first stage in April, it's the right call. If that wasn't the case, I think this is a little rushed, because we are now starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a little light. Or at least we think it's the light, but it's the first time we can say that in a very long time. So I think it's probably the right move, because I would assume the PDC did this in conjunction with Sky, and hopefully we'll have Matt Porter on sometime fairly soon to shed a little bit more light. But assuming that's the case, I think it's the right call, because you do need to get the season underway, and the most important thing is safety, and the second most important thing is keeping your television partner, Sky Sports, happy. And I think that's what they're doing.
I'm similar. I'd make the same assumption as well. I think there's probably been discussions that have gone on between the PDC and Sky, and they're a big broadcaster for darts, aren't they? Top level darts. They show so many of the big events: World Championship, Premier League, World Match Play, and the Premier League. As we've said on the show before, it's not one of those events where you can pick up and drop it in a different week on the calendar, unless you're doing it in this concept where you've got the behind closed doors run of nights. If you're doing it in its usual way, you've got different venues each night in different cities, in different countries. It's not one of those events where you can say, okay, Monday night we're going to play in Liverpool, Tuesday we're going to play in Berlin. It's just not going to happen. And if they were to push it further back and wait, and as you say, we're starting to see some good news come about with the virus and things opening up, but that's not to say that we get to May, June time and maybe things take a turn for the worse, and then you're at that stage of the year and you're thinking, well, we haven't even played any Premier League games yet. So I think, yeah, it probably is the right move. Yeah, there's been a few people on social media that have said, why don't we just scrap the Premier League this year, come back next year? But the PDC, they are tied into these deals with the broadcasters that pay the money to have these events on, and the top players play on their networks, and the Premier League is right at the top of their list of events and priorities. So I think it is the right move. It's kind of a shame, isn't it, for the players like Dimitri Van den Berg, Jose de Souza, Johnny Clayton. They're all going to be making their full Premier League debuts, and fingers crossed all three of them make it through that first stage, because if they don't, then their Premier League experience first time round will be getting eliminated behind closed doors. You're kind of rooting for them three now to make it through that first stage, so that when hopefully we do get that second stage, they do get to experience it as a full Premier League player with that crowd with them as well. So for us as well, it means that we are going to get a bit of televised darts after the UK Open next week. We are going to get 9 nights in April. So I guess for a TV viewer, that's something to look forward to.
Of course, there's no reason why the PDC couldn't just make the Premier League an extra 9 weeks long, and after this first stage behind closed doors, relegate 2 players and bring in Raymond van Barneveld and someone else and do 9 more weeks. But we'll leave it at that. Now, in related, obviously, some optimistic news from the UK government this week that fans could come back to arenas in May. Do you think we might just see a full crowd back at the Winter Gardens for the World Match Play this summer?
I'll probably say the words I'm using at the moment are cautiously optimistic about everything. If you'd have said this time last week, all these dates that have come out in the last 24 hours about how things are going to open up, I'd have been very surprised. But the signs are good, and we're all hopeful, got our fingers crossed that this is how it's going to work for the next few months. We are going to get to these different stages and more things are going to open up, and we'll get to that. I think the date was June 21st, when a lot of restrictions will be eased and we'll start to get back to normal here in the UK. And of course, the World Match Play, that is the following month. So it's still a long way away for me to really get that excited about it. But you've got to be optimistic now about things that are going to open up. And we said at the start of the year, after the World Championship, we said, how are things going to look this year? And we said you're probably looking towards that second half of the year when things are really hopefully going to open up and we are going to see the fans come back. The World Match Play after that June 21st date I mentioned, that is the next big event here in the UK for darts. So that would be brilliant if we could get that. If we could get to the end of July, you can't really guarantee it's going to be sunny in Blackpool. I think I've been 3 times now, and I think I've had 1 sunny day out of about 2 weeks worth of days that I've been there. But just to be there, I think for the darts fans would be brilliant. And we've seen with the PDC as well, the last few days they've put the weekend packages on sale for the Players' Championship finals in Minehead towards the end of November. So they're starting to put things in place, hoping that we are going to see these events back to how they were before the virus outbreak and everything. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but maybe not going all out at the minute to say we are going to get to that opening night of the World Match Play and it will be the Winter Gardens and it will be a sellout. But fingers crossed that is what is going to happen.
Well, I think it might be a sellout. The question is a sellout 0%, 10%, 25%, 50%, or 100%, or somewhere in between? I don't think there'll be a ticket available for the World Match Play. But yeah, I mean, as now I guess we both said in the last couple questions, it is looking optimistic now that at least things are improving. And we've been taking it day by day for nearly a year now, but we can finally start to realistically look ahead in terms of weeks and months with some idea, not any certainty, but some idea of what things might be like in a month. I mean, I think we're probably overall a couple of years away from, really being normal, everything back to normal. And we're still seeing, emerging strains of COVID, and we don't know about how long immunity lasts or near immunity lasts from these vaccines. But the quicker we get it to people and to the more people we get it, the better we'll be able to manage it. And we'll start to have some semblance of normalcy, and possibly and hopefully that means for the people who want to, the ability to go to events like the World Match Play this summer. Granted, in the U.S., even though things have been terrible, we still have many places that are letting people go to sporting events. The Miami Marlins, as they're now called in baseball, just announced that they're going to allow 20% capacity this season, which is impressive to, in the middle of a pandemic, to think you can double your audience. Kudos to them. I did steal that joke from someone. But I'm hopeful that we'll get to see, at the very least, a 50% capacity by this summer at the World Match Play. I think that's realistic. I think that's doable, and maybe even more. As Barry Hearn has said when we had him on a few months ago, he's going to listen to the guidance from the government, and that's not just the British government, but in every country where the PDC puts on events. And if it is safe and if the government will allow it, there will be a crowd at the Winter Gardens, and probably, as things are looking now, a fairly good one. We can only hope, but it's now a much more realistic hope than we might have been having for the last year.
If you said to my team, Colchester United, you could get 20% capacity, we'd be saying, where are you going to get all these new fans from? But let's get on to our next guest, and it is with the former major winner and the new PDC tour card holder, Jake Jones.
I'm joined today by one of the newest PDC tour card holders, Jake Jones. Jake, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Are you, matey?
I'm doing well, and thanks for joining us. And first off, congrats on winning your tour card at Q School almost a week ago now, since you won your tour card outright on day 3 at Milton Keynes. What's the last week been like for you?
To be honest, it's been really busy. I've been working as usual, but in between work and family time, I've done a few interviews, 3 or 4 interviews. I've had to complete my PDC membership online and stuff, and I've had to have a few meetings with them over Zoom as well. So yeah, it's been quite busy, to be honest, mate.
I'm sure it'll only get busier once the darts start, and we'll come back to Q School in just a bit. But let's go back to how you got started in darts. How old were you when you first discovered the game, and what got you hooked on playing it?
Well, to be honest, I was about 10 or 11, I'd say. I used to go watch my mum and my grandmother in the local pub. They used to be in the Women's League on a Wednesday night, and I've always been quite good at maths. So one day they just says, do you want to mark the game? And I said, yeah. So I come along and mark the game for him, and I used to have a little throw after the match. And my mum used to say, I used to get really straight in the 5s, 20s, or 1 section. I was only 10 or 11. And she says, yeah, you could be really good at this. So literally from there, I just, every single Wednesday I used to go with them. I had a board in my house I used to practice on, and I used to literally just practice all the time.
Now, you said in an interview with the PDC you were a hot prospect when you were younger, England #1 from the age of 14 to 17. What memories stand out for you from that time?
Between that time, I've got a lot of international tournament memories, really. But a lot of them were to do with actually playing for the England team and captaining the England team. Because obviously it's a great achievement. There's only the 4 boys out of the whole of England that get picked at that time. And I got picked for 4 years running. So, but also, I'd say the World Cup that was held in Ireland the year I played. That's where only one boy from the whole of the country gets picked. And it is a great achievement to me. I've got many a trophy from back in the day as well.
Now, in 2011, you got to the final of the WDF Europe Youth Cup and the World Youth Masters, losing out to Jimi Hendrix both times. How do you look back on those runs and what are 2 of the biggest youth events in the world at the time? Yeah,
definitely. It was, I think that might have been the same year as the World Cup as well. I lost in the semi-finals of the World Cup to Jimi Hendrix again, but at the time, when I was younger, he had something over me. I don't know what it was. It wasn't like he was a much better player than me, but do you know when you've just got like that? He had that edge over me. I think I played him 6 times in total, and every single time's gone to like a last leg decider, and he's more or less beat me every time, and it was so frustrating, especially in the World Cup. It was first to 5 legs, and I was 4-1 up, and I squandered so many chances to get over the finish line, but yet again he beat me. But they are great memories from when I was younger. I can't take them away.
We'll get more recent in a second, but we also got to give a mention to another event in 2011, winning the Torremolinos Open, which has become pretty infamous these days. Not that particular one, but the Torremolinos Open in general. Can you give us a flavor, though, what that week was like for those of us who've never been?
Well, for a start, it was hot. It was quite it was quite bad conditions to play in, as I think it was like mid 30 degrees every day I was playing. But yeah, it was a tiring week as well, because every day there was a different tournament. I think it started off with like a blind event where it was like a pairs, and you just got drawn against a random person. With a random person, sorry. And then it started off with like the first few rounds of the singles, and then the next day was like a youth tournament. The next day was like the last 16 onwards of the singles, and so on. It was a tiring week, but that was one of my first men's titles, I'd say, and I think I'm the youngest person to ever win that as well, which was a proud moment for me.
Now, over the next few years, you started playing some development tour, made your first final in 2014, Q School 2015, and then played development and challenge tour through about 2017. But then we didn't see you play PDC darts for a while. What was the reason behind your break?
Well, like I've said on different interviews, I've always wanted to start a family young. I got with my girlfriend, Kim, when I was, it's 8 and up. I think I was 18 and a half, 19 when I first got with her, and I thought I want to settle down. I knew I was already good at darts, and people used to say it won't go away from you and stuff, and you won't lose your talent. And I thought, okay then. So I started a family young. I've got a little girl who's 5. I've got twin boys who are 3. And then now seeing them grow up, it feels like it's time for me to play darts properly again like I used to, and I'm taking it serious. I'm more dedicated than ever. My girlfriend's absolutely brilliant when I go away. She's like, it puts my mind at ease knowing how good of a mother she is, because it makes me just be able to play darts and just takes my mind off worrying about the kids while I'm away. So she's a big help as well.
So you were raising a family, but you came back at 2020 Q School. Best run was a last 32 with 96 average in one of the games that day. What were your takeaways from playing Q School that year? Did you see enough in your game to say, yeah, you could do this?
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, I've got quite bad memories from that Q School. As I think the first day I got 1 point. I think the second day I got 3 points by getting the last 32. So I was sitting in a good place, to be honest, to get through straight away on my first year back. But I went down to the venue on the Saturday morning, and both of my front windows of my car were smashed. And my car had been it completely ransacked. My darts were stolen, my sat-nav was stolen, and my car was literally just wrote off, really. And it completely put my head in a different place, and I had to use a spare set of darts which weren't the same. To be honest, that made me a lot more hungry for this year. I found a set of darts I really like, and I've had a really, really tough 12 months practice with them, so I think that's what's got me through this year.
Sorry to hear about that, and I'm assuming this year no one broke into your car at Q School?
No, I didn't take it this year. I had a friend drop me off just so my mind was fully at ease while I was playing, and it worked wonders.
Well, it obviously did. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about last year. Obviously, a difficult year for everyone with the pandemic, but you did play 10 Challenge Tour events. As we turn the page into this year, how did you reflect on last year darts-wise?
Darts-wise, for me last year, I played, I think, 4 Challenge Tours at the start of the year. I was still getting used to my new darts. I didn't really feel comfortable because the old darts I used to play with got stolen. They were like an X line from Red Dragon, so they didn't make them anymore. So I had to fully get used to a new set of darts, and it took me, I'd say, a good 4 or 5 months to get really used to them, starting to feel very comfortable and confident again. And I started the online darts, and I've had a lot of success in the online darts, and I think that's where I picked up my new my management and my sponsorships, as I played Corey Cadby online in a money match, and I think they saw how well I can play in that. I think I averaged like 92 in that, which isn't fantastic, but it's a good start. And then I played a few other matches after that online as well against other people for money matches, and I think like my lowest average was 95 and a half. I did play really, really well in all of them, more or less. But yeah, it's going to the Challenge Tours at the end of the year. I did play okay, but I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me because of how well I'd been playing at home. It felt like there was a target on my back because of how many tournaments I was winning online, and it kind of did put me at edge a little bit. It put me under the cosh, really.
bring up two things to talk about. First, you mentioned your manager, William Adamson. How much of a help has he been, and I guess going forward now into this next step of your career?
Well, for someone like Will to put his faith in me, it means a lot because over the years he's had an incredible line of players. He's still got a top 32 player in Brendan Dolan under his belt, and to have people like that come to me and say, "Listen, I'm excited for the future. I think you're a real good prospect," and put his money in. To be honest, it was without even meeting me. All he's done is seen me online, and without meeting me, he's just given me that extra confidence, really, that someone actually does see that I've got talent. Do you know what I mean? And it does mean the world. I know it sounds weird, but it means the world because this is what I've always wanted. So yeah, it's brilliant.
Definitely. And you also mentioned you felt like you had a target on your back at Q School. You got through the first stage with a couple decent runs. What were you feeling heading, though, into the second stage? Did you feel confident that you would get a tour card?
To be honest, I felt like I played very poor in the first 3 days. And I know it sounds quite bad because I probably played a lot better than a lot of people there, but for my own standards and ability, I felt like I was very poor, to be honest. I think the overall average was like 84, 85, and I was a bit nervous because I thought I just want to make it to that final stage, and all it takes is one good day. And if not that one good day, then 2 steady days to get your tour card. And I thought, as long as I get in them next 4 days, I can win. And it's nice when you can walk in the room, you look around, and you've got ex top 10 players, Robert Thornton, Kevin Painter. You've got a lot of really, really decent players. And to walk in a room and think, it doesn't matter who I play, I feel like I can beat them if I play my own game. That's what got me through, really.
Of course, you beat one of those players on day 2, Richie Burnett, and then, of course, on day 3, went all the way to win your tour card. 4 of those wins came in last leg deciders, including some big outs. 86 against Eddie Lovely with him waiting on double 16, 132 against John O'Shea with him waiting on a 2-darter. First, that 132, we got to ask, what was the route you took?
On the 132, to be honest, it was a brilliant leg from both of us, but I remember it well because I went 25 right on top of the wire, and how my darts sit up, I thought, I love my first dart going above the treble 20. So I went for the ball, and I hit the 25 right above, and I switched to the treble 19, and it went straight in. And I didn't stop or hesitate or anything. I just went straight for it. Didn't look what he was on, and it just went in, and it was just like a massive relief because when you check stuff like that out, it's horrible for the opponents, and I've had it done on me many a time. But it's such a relief because the moments like that are the ones that win you the match. If I miss that 132, I think he was on 68. That could easily go in 2 darts for himself. He's an ex-world win my world master. Do you know what I mean? He's a brilliant player himself. So that was a big part of the day for me.
Yes, indeed, and of course, the most important finish of all was the 72, again an indecider to beat Gordon Mathers. When that double went in, what were the emotions that were going through you?
Oh, it was, to be honest, it was brilliant. It was a mixture of excitement to realise what I've just done, emotions in, I'm just so drained from the week. Like it's a long 6 days. Do you know what I mean? You start practicing at 9 o'clock in the morning. Some probably even early, but for me it was 9 o'clock in the morning. And you're finishing playing darts at 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Do you know what I mean? You're on the board for 9 hours, 6 days straight. It's quite a tough ordeal, to be honest. I know people might look and think they're only chucking darts. Do you know what I mean? But it's very mentally and physically draining.
Of course, just a couple more questions. We'll look ahead now. You have your tour card. First Pro Tour event will be this Thursday at the Super Series in Bolton, followed by the UK Open the following week. Just how excited are you to test yourself against the world's best?
Oh, definitely. My mates are asking me, has it sunk in yet? To be honest, it hasn't fully sunk in yet that I'm a tour card holder. And I've got a long time. Do you know what I mean? I've got 730 days. I've got 2 full years to play on the Pro Tour and European tours when all this this COVID stuff's gone away. But I'm so excited to play. I think it'll sink in fully on that first day when I turn up and see the best in the world, and I'm playing amongst them. It really will.
And then lastly, now that the season's about to start, have you set yourself any goals for season 2021, or are you just going to take it one match at a time?
To be honest, my aim is definitely to just retain my tour card within the next 2 years. So that's that's the first step, really, just getting into the top 64 by the end of 2022. Getting into that top 64, keeping that tour card, and I can build on it. If I do better and get into the top 64 in the first year, absolutely amazing, because then I've got a year of not looking back, and I can just gain on that. I can just gain and gain and gain, because I won't lose any money off the rankings. I can just gain and hopefully push on, and the confidence is there, my ability's there. Mentally, the game's there for me, and I know what I can do, so that's all that matters.
Well, Jake, thank you for joining us, and best of luck on starting your career and pushing on towards the top 64.
Thank you very much, Burton. It's been a pleasure talking to you, mate.
Thanks again to Jake for joining us. More news to get to, and Trophygate. Des Jacklin, the BDO chairman, on Friday night revealing that he has collected the BDO Men's World Championship trophy back from Wayne Warren, the current champion from 2020, and he said that the BDO is alive. To quote Mervyn King, really?
Yeah, that's, I think, the correct question. Really? And I think the answer is just really. And that does make me realize we did forget. It's good that we're asking this question right after our interview with Jake Jones. And we did ask him about the Torremolinos Open, but we forgot to ask him, does he still have his trophy from 10 years ago in that event? Or has Des Jacklin come to collect that too? I mean, let's start with the first part, the collection of the trophy. Authorities seem to agree that legally Des Jacklin and the BDO have the right to collect the trophy. Whether it's a good image thing to go out and collect it or not, we can put that to the side. It seems that Des Jacklin had every right to go and collect, or let me phrase that, Des Jacklin had every right to make sure that the BDO trophy was returned to whoever has the rights to the BDO assets. And therefore, fine, he collected the trophy, and I'll leave that part at that. Whether it was a smart move, driving all the way 9 hours round trip to Wales in the middle of a pandemic, against governmental advice to do that, that's another story. But I'm not going to comment on that. What I'm going to comment on is the social media aspect of it. We're well aware of Des Jacklin's and Paula Jacklin's many postings on Facebook and on forums and other places and on the official BDO website over the last couple of years. But this was just pathetic. And there's no other word to describe it. You got the trophy back, the trophy that you had every right, it seems, to collect back. Where's the need to go all over social media and post about it? That's not professional. That's pathetic. It's embarrassing. It's disgraceful. And there's no other way to describe it. It's just embarrassing. The BDO and darts deserves better. And Wayne Warren deserves to be shown as a human being respect. This was none of that. And I come back to the word pathetic because I don't think there's a better word in the English dictionary, at least not a better word that we can say and keep our clean rating on iTunes. So I'll leave it at pathetic because pathetic describes it perfectly.
Wow, there's really no shame, is there? I mean, we put a question of the week out, as we always do, on Twitter, and one of them was, is the BDO still alive? And overwhelmingly, our listeners have gone with no, 97% yes, 3%. And I didn't think 2021, what a year it's been so far. Last week, we had our Raymond van Barneveld Appreciation Minute. This week, we're talking about the BDO getting headlines in The Sun, the Daily Mail. They've been everywhere over the weekend with that Facebook post that we saw Friday night from Des Jacklin. And it's such a shame, isn't it, the way that things are going with that organisation. 2020, we thought that was it. We weren't going to see them again, but 2021, things are still going on, and it's just kind of sad, really, the way things have turned out. Whatever we remember about the BDO, the legacy, if you want to call it that, or the good times that were there, it's going to have that dark cloud over it, not just because of this thing that we saw at the weekend, but what we've seen over the last year or so, because it's just not what you want to see in darts. And when you look at the other side of darts, you think years ago it was BDO versus PDC. They're just chalk and cheese, aren't they? The way they're run and the way everything operates. The BDO right now, it's just, I'm struggling for words really to put into it. And as you say with Wayne Warren, you've got a feel for him. We've spoke about him on the show. We were fortunate to be there as a podcast, myself and Hannah, for that night that he won the World Championship. And I'll always remember it, standing in the players' lounge after, waiting to have a quick chat with him before I headed off home, and waited 10 or 15 minutes, still no sight of him. And I went back downstairs to the arena, and there he is, surrounded by all his family and friends. The smile from ear to ear. He's got the trophy in his hand. I don't think he let go of it for very long that night. Just soaking all that in, and managed to get a few minutes with him at the end. And he came back up to the players' lounge, and everyone was singing his name. And I know he had a great celebration and everything after that, even though he didn't get the money that he probably thought he was going to get, or what he deserved to get. But having that trophy, I think, would have been the right thing to do. Let him, not keep it forever, but until there is a next BDO World Championship, or when we get to the end of the BDO and things are starting to be spread around, what were they going to do with that? What are they going to do with this? Let him get that opportunity now that things are hopefully going to open up, to parade that trophy around in Wales and everywhere, do all the exhibitions, and thank the people that helped him along the way. That would have been the right thing to do. But as we've seen in recent times, there's Jacqueline as the BDO chairman. He's not been doing the right things, and it's just another sorry chapter in how the BDO story is going to eventually end.
In other news, former major winner Kevin Painter announced his retirement from the professional game after failing to get a tour card at Q School for the third year in a row, though he still says he'll continue to, once things open up, play the exhibitions circuit. How will the artist be remembered in years to come?
I think straight off, when you think of Kevin Painter, the one match, the one memory that sticks out is that World Championship final, 2004 at the Circus Tavern against Phil Taylor. And at the time, it was the most watched game in PDC history. That was eclipsed by Phil Taylor, Roman van Barneveld 3 years later. But back then, 2004, I think they had something like 800, 900,000 people watching it for darts back then. We're talking nearly 20 years ago. And especially on Sky, a network like that, that's big numbers. And it's a game that people always remember. And I think a lot of people might have it in their top 5 World Championship finals in the PDC, maybe across both coasts, I don't know. But I remember it was just a fantastic game. Kevin Painter 4-1 up in sets, goes back to 6-all, and he was, I can't remember if it was 3-2 or 4-3 up in that final set, and he had double 16 left. And Phil Taylor takes out whatever the checkout was. So he was waiting on a double to win a World Championship, and he ended up losing out in a sudden death leg in the end. It was a tough way to lose any final, but you think back to that game, he's took a hell of a lot of credit for that game, and he ended up winning a major title, as you say, 2011, the Players' Championship finals. And you fast forward to then, you're kind of thinking, has the ship sailed for Kevin Painter to win a TV title? But every credit to him, he does it, and that gets him into the Premier League the following year. And I was looking back at his Premier League, going into that final week of the season in 2012. We talked about last year how close that race to the playoffs was. What about this for a year? You had the players that were 3rd to 7th, and this is back when there was only 8 players, separated by just 1 point going into that final night. And he plays Andy Hamilton first game of the night. If he wins that game, he gets in the playoffs. He ends up losing it, and who knows where that could have took him getting to the finals. Maybe he would have got him another Premier League, but I think he'll look back and he'll be happy with how his career's gone. 94 to 2018, 24 out of 25 World Championships across both codes. That takes some doing. So I think he'll look back with a lot of pride, a lot of fond memories, and I think darts fans as well, when they think of the name Kevin Painter, there'll be a lot of memories that they'll think of and think he was a good player.
Yeah, and especially on the television stage. And I think he'll be the first to admit, and he even said so a bit in his retirement interview with the PDC, that he struggled to get up for the Pro Tour events and the floor events, but he did it some real work in the TV events, making, as you mentioned, that World Championship final, getting to within a leg of winning the title, making 2 other World Championship semifinals, winning the Players' Championship final. You have to be a quality player to have that kind of success on television and to do so over an extended period of time. It wasn't just like, no offense to Mark Duttridge, he had a couple of years where he was at the top of his game. Kevin Painter did this over, more than a decade, if you go back to his time in the BDO, where he really was a top player, a top 16 player in the televised events for 10, 15 years. But he underachieved, I'll say, in the floor events, winning just a couple, or 3, I believe, PDC ProTour events in a long time on the PDC. Did make another final a few years ago, losing out to Kyle Anderson when Kyle Anderson won his Pro Tour title back in 2017. But that was his first final since, I think, 2012 for Kevin Painter. And it shows how he did drop off, especially on the floor, compared to television, but also at the end of his career. He'll be remembered rightfully for that World Final performance where he came that close, and obviously for that win over Mark Webster in the Players' Championship final, where he was probably the best player that week, hitting double 16 last start in hand when Webby was coming back at him at that final, and his finishing in that final, I think we can't forget, over 60% in a major final, and he needed to be hitting over 60% to get over the line in that match. He rightfully will be remembered as a major champion and a world finalist. But in many ways, he probably should have accomplished more. If he had been able to play on the floor like he did on TV, he might still be on the Pro Tour. But there's a lot of players you can say that about. And he, did pretty well for himself regardless.
Now we'll move on to our final guest on this week's show, and it is with a former quarter-finalist on the European Tour, Maik Kuivenhoven. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former European Tour quarter-finalist, Maik Kuivenhoven. Thanks for the time, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm all right. Yeah, doing well. I'm at work now, but this afternoon I'm off to England.
Happy days. Well, only one place to start, and that is with your tour card. At the end of last season, you were number 66 and heading back to Q School, but Kyle Anderson handed in his tour card back and you get to keep yours. When the news came out, did it catch you by surprise, or had you heard something like that might happen?
It was a very big surprise. I wasn't expecting anything anymore. It was a week before Q School, so it was a very big surprise. But very happy to stay in and continue my career.
Yeah, I can imagine. And your entry was in for European Q School. I assume everything was all set to go to Germany. Is that the most happy you've been to cancel a darts trip?
Yeah, in the last few months, well, I was. It was my most important call. I was very happy. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to your PDC career in a moment, but I want to go back to the start for you in darts. When did you first discover darts, and what interested you in playing the sport?
I first started in 2004 in the local pub. But in 2015, I started playing darts at a higher level. I started training and go to tournaments and stuff like that. So that's now 6 years almost ago. And we're doing well. So it's great.
Yeah, and you mentioned there 2004, so this is around the time when we've got Raymond van Barneveld picking up Lakeside titles. Did you watch much of him growing up at the Lakeside and obviously PDC? How much of inspiration did you take from that?
Yeah, of course. It's the biggest dart player in Holland. So, of course, I watched him. He inspired most of the Dutch guys and a lot of guys in the world. That's an inspiration. And that's when it all started for me as well. And, look where it goes now.
Probably around 10, 11 years then you played at a local level before pursuing it a little bit further. What made you want to start pursuing a career further in darts at that time?
I played football. I couldn't play that anymore because of an injury on my knee. So a couple of years I only played darts in the pubs. And I was thinking, well, this is going good. How far can I go? I got a new challenge.
How far did you go with the football?
Not far. Yeah, and locally I was in by my club. I was in the first team. So I was a striker there for the last couple of years, and I was doing well. But then I got my injury, and I couldn't play anymore. So I picked up my darts a few years later.
Well, a new challenge with the darts, and start of 2017 you go to Q School for the first time. What persuaded you then to go and try and give the professional circuit a go, or try and get onto that circuit?
The local tournaments went well. I started winning here, played at National League. Everything was going well, and I thought, maybe give it a try, and we'll see how far it goes. There were some sponsors in my local pub who said, "Here, we will give you the money. Go and try it." So that was the first time.
2018, that was a big milestone. You came through the European qualifiers to play on the European Tour for the first time in Germany. You got a win on your debut as well. What was that whole experience like?
Yeah, that was great. First time on such a big event, and winning for the first time. Yeah, that was great. Then you know that you're in a good way, that you maybe can achieve something more. And then you think, I can continue this, keep training, and keep believing in yourself, and get the most of it.
Yeah, and you certainly did that. Q School comes around again, start of 2019, and you get your tour card, I believe, the last spot on the European Order of Merit. What was it like, the wait to find out that you'd done enough?
Yeah, I had to wait 10 days because the UK Q School was 2 weeks later. And I have to wait for the entries in the UK. So it was a long wait, but I got it. So I was very happy at the moment. That felt like a few weeks ago when I held it.
So how did you find that first year on the tour then, 2019? As far as picking up prize money, it was a tough year, but how much did you learn from that first season playing in all the events?
Yeah, a lot. It's a whole new experience for me on the Pro Tour with all the big names. The format is different than I was used to. So it was a hard first year, but I learned a lot. And last year it went better. So I think you see it in the last years. Every year I get a little bit better. And I have to continue that.
Yeah, I was going to say, how important do you think it is for players that when they get that tour card, that they do get 2 years, not just 1 year, but they've got that first year to kind of settle in and get used to those new surroundings like you did?
Yeah, you have to. And only a few players who manage to get in the top 64 in the first year, but the percentage is really low. So you have to be there for 2 years. You have to. Else you don't get a good chance.
Well, let's look back at last year then, 2020. You get off to a flyer quarter-final in the first Players' Championship event, another one the next Players' Championship weekend. You qualify for 2 European tours. Before that 4-month break that we had because of the virus, how did you feel? Do you feel like you were now showing your potential those early weeks of the season?
Yeah, I was playing. I should play. It was going good. I was good on the board. I wasn't nervous. Everything felt good, and it paid off. And then, Corona came, and that was hard for me with the training and at home with the kids, and everything was different. So it was hard for me to keep my focus and keep training and everything. It was we didn't know when we have to play again, so that was difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've obviously got a lot going on back home. You've got your young family. I know you've been working as well along with the darts, so do you feel like you've now got that balance right heading into this year?
Yeah, I think so. I take my time off for darts a bit more than I used to, so I have a bit more time and a bit more relaxed between the darts and going to the darts. So I think I prepare better, and I hope it's going to pay out.
Well, one thing I've got to mention as well is the 2 wins that you had last year against Michael van Gerwen in the Players' Championship events, both in last leg deciders. How special is it to get a win over, well, the man at the time he was world number one, but for Dutch starts, he's still top of that tree?
Yeah, great, of course. It's fantastic to win for Michael. If you can win from Michael, then you can win from everybody. So it keeps you going. You know, you can reach it. You can be better, win more. It helps. It helps. Your confidence is growing by those wins.
Not many people can say they've got a 100% winning record against Michael either. Is that something that you joke about at times, saying you look at the player who's right at the top there and he's never beat me yet?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I speak to Michael sometimes, and sometimes when he is joking, I can mention this. So I do that when I need to.
Well, one of those European tours that you qualified last year to Sindelfingen, and you make the quarterfinals, you beat Dale Gurney, Glenn Durrant on the way. Where does getting those wins over 2 Premier League players on stage in a weekend rank for your achievements so far?
Yeah, that was a great weekend. It was the start of many stage weekends, but it was phenomenal. It was everything went well, and was very happy with the wins. It should be like that anywhere, always, but no, it didn't work out the weekends after that.
Yeah, we see you a lot on the stage during the end of last year. You had your debuts, the European Championship, Players' Championship finals, the big one, of course, the World Championship. 2 of those with no fans, the European one, a small crowd. Did it still feel like a big occasion, those debuts, even with no crowd?
Yeah, it felt different. Without the audience, it isn't what it should be. It is different. The venue is quiet. It's not how it used to be, and how it should be. So it's different to play on stage like that. But unfortunately, it didn't work out for me. And I hope this year is a lot different.
Yeah, we've all got our fingers crossed for that. And as we've seen over the last 12 months, we've seen some players, they've played a lot better without the crowd. Some players have found it harder than others. Are you someone that when the crowds come back, you're really happy that they're going to be back and you can play your best game?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think most of the dart players like the crowd when they're cheering and everything. That's good for everybody. When you have the audience behind you, it is always a pleasure to be on stage and throw your darts. It gives something extra.
Lastly, looking ahead, then, it's a big opportunity that's presented itself, not having to go back to Q School, not a lot of money to defend from 2 years ago. Do you see this year as a chance to maybe push on and confirm your place in that top 64 and maybe go a bit further?
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's my luck from bad first year, and that I can continue with my third year, and hope to do it much better than the first year, and make it to a steady PDC player. I hope to reach to the top 50 and see how it goes.
Well, fingers crossed on getting there, Mike. We appreciate your time. Safe travels over to England this week, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in 2021.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again to Mike for joining us. And as always, we'll finish up with some listener questions to round off the show. And we're going to start off with, and it comes from Winnie McDade, and it says, with the announcement from the UK government, how do you see the PDC calendar and schedule going for the rest of the year?
I think we'll see possibly in May another 1 or 2 Super Series. I think it's still too early to know where we're going to be on terms of European tour events, because we still don't have guidance from the German government or the Dutch government or any of the Eastern European governments where there might be events on when international sport will be able to continue with fans. But we will hopefully sometime soon see that. But I think we'll get some more and get as many of the Players' Championship events in early in the year as possible. And I think that makes sense. And then put those European tour events into the summer and into the autumn. Not many of them into the autumn, because there's going to have to be a lot of televised events. And if you look historically, other than the World Cup, other than the UK Open, other than the Premier League, and other than the World Match Play, the other major TV events all come in the autumn and into the winter. So it's just getting through as many of the Pro Tour events early on as you can. I think they're going to try to do that, stack the Players' Championship events now and the European Tour events later in the year once things open up in Europe. And we'll get hopefully more guidance on that sometime fairly soon.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I'd probably say when we got into 2021, there was people asking when's the calendar going to come out from the PDC. We ended up with a few of the events, the three Super Series events, the UK Open, the Masters, and nothing really beyond April. And I think that's fair enough, isn't it? Because with this virus, we don't know how things are going to progress throughout the year. So now that we have got this news, maybe, as you say, we'll see some more things announced for a little bit later on down the line into May, into June time. But I don't think we're going to see a big announcement on the calendar just yet. Who knows? We'll ask Matt Porter when we hopefully get to chat to him next week on the show how things are going to progress with that. But you've got to say, with the PDC, last year, 2020, this virus happens and the calendar, it was already set, wasn't it? All these events they had to cancel. I think they've been a little bit more cautious this time around. They don't want to go out and all guns blazing and announce all these events and then have to reschedule loads, have to cancel loads. I think that's fair for the fans, and I think it's probably fair for the players as well. They don't want to put all these dates in their diary and then have to cancel them like that. So I think the cautious approach is the best one, but I think as time goes on, maybe after the UK Open, we'll see some more things announced, maybe even some Challenge Tour and development tours.
Now, the second question comes from inside the WDF. On the ranking list of majors that we did, I'm trying to remember when we did it, but it was sometime fairly recently, which tier, since we forgot about it, would we put the Torremolinos Open in?
I can't believe we forgot about it, and we've waited. This is our 190th episode, and we wait all that time to talk about the Torremolinos Open, and we get two questions on the show. You've heard Jake Jones earlier, a former winner of the event, chat to Burton about this magical event, the Torremolinos Open, and now we're talking about it as well. For me, it's got to be top, hasn't it? Because you think in recent times with the BDO, a lot of their advertising went into this event, put together the World Trophy, the World Masters, the World Championship. There was probably more advertising for the Torremolinos Open than all three of those put together. I remember the programme from a couple of years ago at Lakeside. You had the full page for advertising this event. So it's a special event, and one day I'd like to get out there, play for the week. Maybe I think there's so many different events that you can play in. You've got a bit of sun as well. I think what we've all had to put up with over the last year, no holidays for a lot of people, a week in Torremolinos for this event, throw a few darts as well. I think it's got to be right at the top, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, it's definitely up there, but it's no, Players Championship 37 Derby, where Mark Walsh defeated Phil Taylor 6-4 in the final. It's no Players Championship 9 in Coventry, where Mark Walsh defeated Phil Taylor, also 6-4 in the final. You got to put those ahead of it, because, those are two of the four biggest events of all time, behind or alongside only the other two times Mark Walsh defeated Phil Taylor in a Pro Tour final. Those four events aside, I would say the Torremolinos Open is probably the fifth largest major, which means it's either at the very bottom of tier 1 or the very top of tier 2. I'll leave it for you guys to decide where to slot it in. It's a tough decision. I guess top of tier 2, because it just can't rival those four great moments in the history of humanity.
There we have it. Well, final question for this week, and it comes from George Dobson, who says, how many majors will Matthew Edgar win in 2021?
Unfortunately, well, I guess it might not be streamed, so he might be able to win Torremolinos, but there's going to be a lot of competition for that one. I don't want to upset Matthew Edgar, because, God forbid, he just goes and slanders us on Edgar TV in the future, and probably rightfully so. I'm going to have to say he's going to win all of them +2. I think that will be a safe bet. So however many there are, +2 is my answer.
Well, I'll go another direction and say, how many majors will Matthew Edgar qualify for in 2021? We've seen him appear in the last couple of World Championships. Of course, every tour card holder gets into the UK Open. We've seen him in the Players' Championship finals, but maybe this is the year that we see him getting the World Match Play, maybe the World Grand Prix, maybe the European Championship, maybe the Grand Slam. I know he was very close before to getting in the Grand Slam got very close in the qualifiers before. So I'm going to say that we'll see him make his debut in one of those events. And if you're going to win a major, you've got to be in that tournament. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, indeed. Anything else, though, for this week?
Well, a few things before we go. Got to say, as always, big thank you to our sponsor, Low 6, who present this show. We should have some contests next week on the PDC Picks app with the UK Open, so we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Got to give a mention as well. We're going to be doing a sweepstake during the UK Open. We've got a Danny Baggish shirt to give away, courtesy of Galaxy Apparel. All you've got to do to enter, just retweet our pinned tweet, tag a friend as well, and we should have 160 spots for this one with the field of the UK Open. Now, unfortunately, if some players pull out, then it's going to be first come, first serve. So if you are the 160th person to enter, then you will miss out. So fingers crossed we'll get everyone involved in that. And I forgot to mention it, you reminded me last week, our darts trivia, of course. We had a great question last week, and we had 2 people combined to get the correct answer. So shout out to Squish, who got 7 of the 9, and a shout out to Chris B, who got 2 of the 9. So them 2 together getting the correct answers. And let's hear from Hannah now, who's going to bring us this week's darts trivia.
This week's trivia question is, what 100-plus checkout did Scott Mitchell take out during the deciding set of his 2015 BDO World Championship final win against Martin Adams? Again, that's what 100-plus checkout did Scott Mitchell take out during the deciding set of his 2015 BDO World Championship final win against Martin Adams?
Thanks to Hannah for bringing us this week's question. Hopefully a little bit easier than last week's. Who got Colin Monk and who got Garrett DeVos?
I'll have to go and look back on that one. Hang on a second.
While I was doing that, we do sometimes and we did, of course, get our question from Andy Scott at the PDPA. I ran this question by him, and he got Colin Monk, I think second person he guessed. But it took probably half an hour to get Garrett DeVos. But credit to Andy Scott for getting Colin Monk so quickly.
Yes, I've got it up here. So Colin Monk was the last out of the 9, and Gert DeVos was the second to last person. So those were the 2 hardest ones. So Squish, who got Gert DeVos, Chris B got Colin Monk. So a team effort there.
Well, good job, guys. Those were the difficult ones. And, it goes back to what we said on the show last week. Obviously, normally this is the wrap-up point, but just how good of a player Gert DeVos is when he's playing, that he was able to 7 years in a row win a match at the World Championships. Just never could kick on, other than one year they made the quarterfinals and win multiple matches at a World Championships. But he is a major champion overall. So look forward to seeing him this year. Hopefully we can get him on at some point. Please let us know if there's anyone else you want us to get on. We have, after this week now, 40 more tour card holders to go over the course of the year to get them all on. I know a few of them don't speak English, so they'll be a little bit more difficult. But I guess a lot of you think I don't speak English with my accent. So it hasn't been a problem for 190 episodes. Hopefully it won't be a problem for the rest of the year. But thanks to our listeners, thanks to our sponsors, thanks to our guests. We will be back next week to recap the first weekend of Players Championship event Super Series 1 and look ahead to the first ranking major of the season in the UK Open. Until then, hang tight.